Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of spookyaf. My name is Rob, and today I'm joined by my co-host Suze.
Hey guys.
How are you doing today, Suze?
It's another day, and I still haven't won the Euro Millions, so we are where we are.
We are where we are. That is the motto for this podcast.
That's the motto for 2023. Like, I guess we're here now.
A millennial in 2023. We are where we are.
Yep.
So yeah, we'll get into today's episode, and it's been a pain in the hole to research this one. I've spent time consulting a book, feeling like Gandalf in the Fellowship of the Ring, like consulting tomes, looking for things that have happened in the past. I've been like bent over a desk. I've been like reading these books like by candlelight, making notes and such, being like, where does this all lead?
Red string all over a bulletin board in your room.
There's post-it notes all over this book now. You know, it's used, which is good. So it's been read and consulted, and I'm confident now with what I have. Yeah, today we are talking about Maynooth University. All that comes with Maynooth University. For anyone that doesn't know, Maynooth is a town in Ireland, close to Dublin. I suppose you could say it's where I'm kind of from. I spent my formative years living there as a teenager, went to school there, and met all of my current friends, basically, through Maynooth.
Except for Suze.
You know, Suze came afterwards. You know, we good things come afterwards. But yeah, so it's a very cool town. Maynooth University has been around quite a while. It's a pretty cool college. It's kind of it's a mix of old and modern, kind of nicely put in together.
Yeah, it's a really nice place because I remember we went walking up there with you guys once, and it was just really nice to walk around and see all the new buildings that were kind of like very glass and light, and then to see the old stonework of the previous bygone years.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing about, I'm going to interchangeably say St. Patrick College and Maynooth University. It's now all just Maynooth University or Maynooth College, so I'm just going to talk about Maynooth, and I'll clarify when I need to.
Cool.
The interesting thing about Maynooth is that previously, in its kind of prior life, it used to be a seminary where a priest would go to study, and it was effectively kind of classed as like the head of the Catholic Church in Ireland, effectively. Some people would even kind of go to say that it was where the real government of Ireland sat, in that it was kind of the head of Catholicism in Ireland. It also, interestingly, which I discovered, is actually apparently the oldest college in Ireland, ahead of Trinity.
Oh.
Yeah, so I didn't actually know this, but apparently St. Patrick's College, there used to be like another smaller university that was there prior to Trinity College, so sometime in the 16th century. And it closed down, but then reopened, I think, in the 18th century.
Okay.
I guess in some ways it technically predates Trinity, which is in Dublin and classed as the oldest university in Ireland. I guess technically it does, but it did close down and then reopen in a different sort of vein. But it's a pretty cool place. And St. Patrick's College, it's basically like the Catholic version of Hogwarts.
It is.
Yeah. Instead of winning points for your house to win the cup, you win points for flagellation.
Jesus.
Instead of carrying around your broomstick going to classes, you're carrying around your Bible.
Oh.
You know, there's still the consistent thing, though, of people walking around dressed in robes. That is the one consistent thing across the board.
Yeah, exactly. That is the one carryover.
Yeah, and they keep the guys and girls separate as well. So very similar to Hogwarts in that sense. But yeah, it's a cool place. The buildings are lovely, really, really nice, especially in like the winter time. Like it does kind of look like Hogwarts. It does kind of give off that kind of vibe of like this kind of like older building, like old school style university. It's just kind of this like warm kind of feeling when you're walking around it. It just feels nice. Even though it was the head of the Catholic Church effectively in Ireland for so long.
Which is a bit meh.
Yeah, some heinous shit probably went on there, but we'll glance over that because that's not what this podcast is about.
No, that is a very different podcast.
Yeah, that's a different type of spookiness, which we are not dealing with.
No.
So yeah, Maynooth University, I went there, I did my master's there. As I said, I went to school there as well. I know people that still live there and went to university as well there. And while you're there, you hear all these ghost stories of the old campus, the St. St. Patrick's campus. And you kind of hear all these stories about ghosts and demons and even our boy, the devil, showing up on campus and doing just things in the past. And it's just these stories are kind of just like interwoven, I suppose, with your student experience in Maynooth. You just hear them and you kind of just know that these things happen, like that there's like haunted rooms and haunted buildings and, you know, haunted corridors and
just whole areas where you're like fully expecting to like find yourself in a cold spot.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and if you walk around the campus at night, like there is that kind of spooky sort of feeling that you get. You know, it kind of, there's certain areas, I feel anyway, when you're walking around that you kind of feel a little bit more unsettled than in other spots. Mm-hmm. But it's a really, really interesting place. And, you know, the one thing that you'll kind of notice about Maynooth is that the people that go there are very like proud of the fact that they go there. And they like to kind of share these stories with you and let you know basically of the things that you can and can't do. So the stories kind of range from like ghost women, like white ladies sort of things, through to like cursed paths that you can't walk down, all the way through to, as I said, the devil showing up and kind of everything in between.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah, and the thing about this is that I suppose with it being previously a seminary for so long, you would kind of expect those stories of the devil and things like that to kind of like flow through it as well, because they're dealing with those sort of topics on a daily basis anyway through their studies.
Yeah, like all they're talking about is like ways you're going to get sent to hell.
Yeah, and you know the fear of kind of like the dark sort of side of things, like the like demons and the devil and like ghosts and spirits and stuff like that. You know, it is kind of interwoven in that kind of like Catholicism, so it's only natural, I suppose, that stories of hauntings and things would kind of come through from it. There are a lot of ghost stories in Maynooth, like quite a lot of ghost stories, and it's actually surprisingly difficult to research this online. It's almost like it's kind of like these like, it's like an oral tradition of sharing ghost stories in Maynooth rather than actually finding somewhere online that you can read about them. So it was actually surprisingly difficult to research these, even though I know some of the stories myself. It's been tough to actually just find this kind of one collective sort of source.
One codex.
Yeah, exactly. So I've managed to find a book, which is actually a really interesting book. It's a walking tour of the ghost stories of Maynooth College.
Oh, wow. Very specific.
Yeah, and it's from 2011, and it's written about walking tours that occurred in like 2010. So it's like reasonably, you know, modern. And it goes into some of the stories and things like that. And it is very, very interesting. I'm not going to go through all the stories because, as I said, there are quite a few. And some of them you can mention in about 2 sentences and then just kind of move on. There's not really much to them.
Yeah.
So I've chosen some of the bigger stories, I suppose. I'm going to lead us into the one that everyone knows about at the end. So don't worry.
Okay.
The big one is coming. The one that it's actually famous for. But, you know, it'd be nice to give some context to it before we get there.
Yeah.
So in Maynooth, as I said, it used to be a seminary, but there also used to be an order of nuns that lived there. And they kind of ran the buildings and things like that. And crucially, they ran the infirmary. So there was a senior infirmary and a junior infirmary. So the senior infirmary would obviously be for like elderly kind of like priests and kind of like academic staff and things like that. And,
right.
You know, no bonus points for guessing what the junior infirmary is for.
What?
Yeah, we're starting in the senior infirmary because this is kind of one of the first kind of interesting places to start. So it used to be the senior infirmary. It's now called the Columbus Center, I believe. It houses kind of various kind of religious groups, I think, related to the Catholic Church. I think still that's what it is used as now, but it did used to be a hospital. The nuns there were the Sisters of Charity.
Problem with that is that my vision of nuns is currently occupied by the posters I've seen on buses in central Dublin of like that new film, The Nun 2. With that like demonic nun. So every time you mention like an order of nuns, I just think of these like teethy monsters.
Yeah, you know what? Like, you might not be wrong. You know, like these are called the Sisters of Charity, but they were also known as the Butterfly Nuns because of their distinctive headdresses.
Oh, that's kind of sweet.
Yeah, obviously with this building being an infirmary, you would expect that there's been a lot of death here. And I think it was open for about 200 years. Obviously a lot of death happened there and probably a lot of gruesome stuff, especially when you're dealing with students and things like that, you know, vulnerable kind of people. And so one night, one of the nuns was locking up. She closed all the doors and she heard noises upstairs, which you wouldn't obviously expect. She went upstairs to investigate, and when she came back down, all of the doors were open again.
Ooh.
So this happened 3 times. After the last time, she was understandably panicked and decided to go and wake the Mother Superior, the head nun. And she went to investigate as well. And I think through their investigation, they decided that there was something wrong, maybe evil.
About Maria?
Going on, yeah. maybe a little bit of poltergeist activity.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, so she was very concerned and called a priest. The lucky thing about being in Maynooth in a seminary is that there weren't exactly a shortage of priests to come deal with the problem.
Throw a stone and hit 3 of them.
Exactly. So she called a priest, and the priest came and decided to exorcise the entire building.
Oh, good God.
Yeah, and apparently that dealt with the problem. The doors didn't randomly open again past that. So I mention this infirmary as our starting point because we're going to kind of come back here a few times throughout.
Okay.
Following then the infirmary, directly across from the infirmary is the Aula Maxima, or the large hall.
Okay.
It's one of those buildings that kind of stands out. It's kind of got this, at nighttime anyway, it's got this kind of like dark shape that kind of cuts through the air.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's basically a kind of a theatre for the university, but it's also where if you graduate from the college, you've graduated in this building.
Oh, okay.
So they hold all of their kind of official ceremonies and things there. I think the choir practices there. As I said, there's a drama side to it as well. The theatre is there. And back in the day when it was a seminary, it was still used as a theatre, but it was a once a week, the priests and stuff would be brought into the Aula Maxima and a film would be put on for them to watch. So it's a pretty active building.
Probably nothing interesting.
No, probably not. I wouldn't imagine they were exactly watching The Exorcist or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's actually quite a nice building, but it is known as kind of one of the spookier spots in the college. Mm-hmm. So security guards have apparently heard noises from the inside of the building, most commonly the sound of the piano that sits side stage playing on its own.
Ooh.
And every time they've went in to investigate, there's nobody there.
Oh, that's creepy.
And this happens consistently. It still apparently happens now. This is kind of the most common occurrence from this building is hearing the piano playing.
And are they playing a piano version of Britney Spears' Toxic? Dun, 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 dun.
Most likely,
Yeah.
Most likely. I would imagine that is probably what they're playing. I can't think of anything else that they'd be interested in playing.
No, I can't either.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about the piano as well playing is that people have reported, the ones who've heard it, that it's playing quite well.
Oh, right.
When you go in and see the piano, apparently there's not even any pedals on the piano, so you're not getting that range. But apparently the ghost who plays the piano does.
Oh, because they're using the ghostly past of the piano.
They're playing through the piano, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, this place does have a lot of stories, as I said, and they all link back to one specific person. In the 1940s, the building was used by the seminarians at this point, so the junior priests. Mm-hmm. And if you look up outside the building, there's a window, and there's this kind of central window that's about 12 feet off the ground. Mm-hmm. A man reportedly fell out of that and didn't survive. He died shortly afterwards.
Oh, you pointed this out to us. I remember this window.
Yeah. The interesting thing about this is that this building is literally directly across from where the infirmary would be. So this guy would have fallen out and would have been literally brought across the fucking path to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, this guy fell out the window in the 40s and died. But what led to him falling out the window is what we're going to talk about.
Okay.
As I said, the building is, in the 40s, it's been used by the seminarians. And up on the stage, which is still there used to be this screen that would be used to show films. Mm. And the priests would come in once a week to look at their films. So the priests come in and they decide to look at their film. And every week, someone is basically chosen out of the group to sit up in the projection room.
Okay.
To basically put the film in and then keep an eye on the projector to, make sure that it runs and then things like that. So, what a projectionist does, basically.
Yeah.
So the projection room is there. This is where the people would go. They'd put in the film. They'd look at the film. And they'd just kind of sit up there, keeping an eye on things. This is where this unfortunate young priest kind of met his end. As I said, one seminarian would be appointed to sit in the box and project the film, and this particular week, the unlucky man was chosen. When he went to use the machine, there was a fault, and somehow he managed to be horrifically electrocuted.
Oh, jeez.
And in the way that he was writhing back in agony, he managed to fall out the window that I previously mentioned and broke his back in the fall. So it's about a 12-foot fall.
Ooh.
And was obviously horrifically injured as well from the electrocution.
Mm-hmm.
He was brought across to the infirmary and was died, unfortunately.
Was diagnosed dead.
Diagnosed dead. So he is the one that's said to play the piano. He apparently turns up and is a bit mischievous, but not sinister in any way. He kind of just likes to play pranks, I guess. Mm-hmm. So still to this day, there's a chair that's put on top of the projector box. People say that's where he sits, and he likes to watch the plays and such. The chair is always there, crucially, and supposedly you can remove it, go downstairs, and at some point the chair will find its way back up on top of the projection box again.
Oh, I like that.
So yeah, there's kind of stories then that have come from that then of groups of students, particularly 2 students from a drama society. They went upstairs to get something. The projection room I think now is kind of used as like a storage room. One of the students went to open the door to the projection box, and she put her hand on the kind of the knob of the door, and as she opened it she saw a face in there and obviously panicked. She fled and ran away, and no one knows what happened, where the face came from and such, and people have kind of just accepted that it's this ghost kind of playing tricks and kind of being a little bit more mischievous.
It's interesting to me, the idea of there being kind of this ghost story of a priest, but like ghosts kind of don't fit into like the biblical version of the afterlife.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really interesting, the kind of like almost cognitive dissonance that's there.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting kind of idea because, yeah, as you said, ghosts don't really kind of come into it, but you'll kind of notice that there's a lot of stuff going on in the university here that you would kind of think that maybe there's something kind of more sinister going on, and that's the reason why ghosts are kind of being kept here.
Okay.
But another story just of this specific ghost. The Drama Society were apparently putting on a production of Dracula. Mm-hmm. As opening night was approaching, they kept experiencing technical difficulties. So the lights were wired up. They'd kind of like turn up the faders to turn the lights on and nothing would happen. So apparently they ripped everything out, rewired the entire place, and again, nothing. Finally, they called in a professional electrician. He looked at every piece of wiring, said it was all sound, all perfect. He ripped it all out, redid it himself again. Nothing worked.
Ooh. I mean, I guess because this ghost doesn't fuck around with electricity.
No, exactly.
Having been electrocuted.
Yeah, he's not a fan of the electricity.
No.
So it's said that apparently a junior priest heard about this and decided to bring in a copy of the Roman Ritual, which is a book used in performance of exorcisms. So he took the book and basically started reading passages from it, I suppose the relevant ones. He read the passages, specifically read them in Latin, and supposedly the minute he said the word amen, the lights came back on.
Oh, at that point, the ghost was like, all right, I guess they're not, like they brought in the exorcist, I guess they're not fucking around.
Yeah, exactly. So people think that, yeah, this was the ghost playing tricks on them. Others have said that the ghost was forced to do this. And they're saying that he was forced to do it because apparently earlier that year, someone had said that, and I quote, "What are we doing performing in this heap?" This is apparently the ghost's way of punishing them for talking shit about his building.
Yeah.
And supposedly a director of one of the plays also spoke poorly about the building. And when he came in the building on his own one day, apparently pieces of the roof fell on his head.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's more than mischievous. That's a bit sinister.
I think he was okay. I think it was more just like a watch your fucking mouth.
Wasn't enough to like KO him.
No. It was more just he got a good spooking. That's the story of the Aula ghost, as he's known. Kind of, an interesting idea of this ghost being a little bit more mischievous than, as I said, sinister.
Yeah. He's a bit more Peevesy than demony.
Yeah, and I'm kind of assuming because he was like a priest, like student, rather than a full priest. Maybe that's why he's still hanging around as a ghost, rather than if he was just a full-on priest. He's probably. He has other shit to do in the afterlife. Yeah,
he's got like heavenly choirs to sing in or whatever.
For sure.
Whatever they think's going on.
Yeah. And also, let's be honest, if he's a student priest, he's probably like anywhere between like 18 to like 22 or 23.
Oh yeah, and that's a volatile age.
So yeah, of course he's just going to hang around just fucking with students and things like that. But yeah, it's an interesting idea that he's just kind of he's just there to have a good time. He's not looking to cause any issues unless it's electricity. Then you can go fuck yourself.
Yeah, because it fucked him.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder what film they were actually showing or planning on showing.
I was just thinking that. I was like, I bet it was something really benign, like The Wizard of Oz or something.
Or Mass.
Oh God.
Just Mass from the previous Sunday. God, brilliant. Throwing a bit of Mass there.
Yeah. I loved last week's in person. That'll be great to watch it filmed.
Yeah.
The cinematography is fantastic.
Yeah, his altar work is just next to none.
Oh, look at the angle they've got on the Eucharist there.
The way he moves around the altar and just, holds that cup, flawless. So yeah, that's the Aula Maxima and our little spooky friend that chills in there with the piano. I'd love the idea of him playing real kind of like ragtime music. You know, like
I was just about to say, was he playing like the entertainer? Da, 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 da.
I'd love that, like really uppity, like ragtime music, like kind of like Old West saloon style music, basically.
Yes.
It'd be brilliant. I'd love that. I will say, having walked past the Ella Maxima quite a lot at nighttime, I've never heard this, but you know, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm not the authority on these things.
No. And to be fair, you weren't talking shit about it at the time, so yeah.
That is true. I wouldn't want to talk shit about the Ella Maxima either, especially the spooky friends that chills in there. Mm-hmm. So moving past the Ella Maxima, then we get to the contemplative garden of Maynooth, which is now, it used to be available to people to kind of go sit at. It's this kind of like pond with like water features and stuff around it.
Okay.
It used to be available to students to kind of sit there and chill, but I think it's fenced off now for obviously safety reasons and things like that. But when we get to the contemplative garden, it is this really kind of just peaceful area. But around certain parts of the campus, it's not been as peaceful as you would hope. And there is one strange occurrence that occurred here that I know you're going to love.
Yeah.
So the story kind of is linked to the senior infirmary that I was talking about.
Right.
So the story comes from the 1980s. The Sisters of Charity, who were the nuns, were kind of fewer in number at this stage, but they still administered to the sick and kind of looked after them.
Yeah, yeah.
One of these nuns passed away. She was quite old. She was kind of, I suppose, one of the senior ones. You know, she'd been around the block a few times. She didn't fuck. You know,
No, she'd seen some shit.
Yeah, she's seen some shit. So a senior staff member went to her funeral, and as all Irish funerals go, in the pub after the funeral, the staff member ran into her niece, who was a woman in her 40s. I don't know why that's key to the story, but it was mentioned.
You know, details are details.
Yeah, absolutely. And she told him a story that her aunt, the nun who had died, had told her. As the man put it, she was a solid woman, and she wasn't away with the fairies as others might be.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she believes this story, though, apparently, but she didn't talk about it, crucially, I think, in work. So in an undetermined period of time, at some point before the 80s, 6 o'clock one bright and airy morning, I have heard that it's probably around like wintertime. Mm-hmm. The sister was walking past the chapel up around the contemplative garden, heading towards a building called Loftus Hall.
Okay. Wait. Loftus Hall, that...
Yeah.
Not Loftus Hall, like...
Yeah, same spelling, name, and everything as our previous episode of Loftus Hall.
Damn, okay.
Mm-hmm. So, as all nuns do, she was walking along saying the rosary to herself.
Naturally.
Yeah, naturally, because she doesn't have anything else to do. And in the distance, as she's approaching Loftus Hall... Sorry, I should explain to you, Loftus Hall is now a lecture theatre. But yeah, so she sees this man in the distance in his robes, which obviously it's not unusual in a seminary. There's lots of people wearing robes. As I said, she was obviously saying the rosary. His attention was focused on the Bible that he was holding in his hands and reading. So, you know, it's just two holy people just doing their things, doing holy things. But he was kind of standing where she needed to go. So as she was coming quite close to him, she was close enough that she decided that it would be polite to call out good morning to him.
Okay.
The man turned to her, and in place of a face, all that was there was a skull.
Ooh, I like that.
In place of hands were bare skeletal fingers. He basically just stared at her. She decided that obviously this was no man, but from what she could tell, it was a manifestation of death itself.
Oh, naturally. I was about to say, this is like Terry Pratchett's death.
Yeah. So as she got closer to him, he just disappeared, just gone. So as she described herself as a sensible woman, she said to herself, I must be asleep. I must be dreaming. I didn't just see death walking behind Loftus Hall.
Right.
So she decides to just put it out of her mind, try to move on from this, and she pushes past the building, Loftus Hall. Mm-hmm. So this guy had just vanished, and she's just decided that it obviously didn't happen. She just assumed she was seeing things, and as anyone would, I suppose, in this situation, she tried to just rationalize to herself what she'd seen.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it would be what most people would do.
Yeah. So as she's walking past the building, though, Loftus Hall, she hears this horrific and like loud, as she described, terrifying noise. Mm-hmm. And she thought to herself, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. Who could be awake at this hour? Thought it might perhaps be a group of seminarians up to some sort of mischief or trying to like prank her, basically.
Yeah.
So she thought that they might be banging all of their desks at the same time and slamming doors and basically making this horrific noise from inside of the building. So she knew for certain that students weren't usually up that early, but she also knew that students would get up this early to basically play pranks and things like that.
Right.
So she decided to go into the building that this guy had disappeared in front of. She looked in the windows of the building first and couldn't see see anyone, but the noise was still going on, and it was like getting louder and louder. As she opens the door to go into the building to basically shout at the students, as soon as she opens the door to look in, the noise stops immediately. And as she looks in the door,
chilling.
Yeah, as she looks in the door, there's no one in the building. So she doesn't know what happened. She has no idea. And as I said, she didn't really tell anyone this story. She told her niece, but that was it.
Right.
And that's her story. You know, she saw death itself just chilling outside the building. And when she went to investigate further, he disappeared. So we don't know if it's death that was making those noises in the building, maybe trying to like draw her in, or if it was a ghost that got all uppity because death had just been there.
A ghost that got uppity.
Yeah, an uppity ghost basically being like, no, fuck you, you know?
Yeah, no, I'm already dead. What are you going to do about it? Fuck.
Yeah. You think you're so cool, Death? Why don't you come and do something about it, huh?
Just like that.
You already fucking got me the first time.
You're not getting me again.
Yeah. So yeah, that's our nun story, seeing death. You know, I if I was going to call this story anything, I'd go with what they've called it in the book, which is The Sister's Secret.
Ooh, that's great.
Yeah, I love it. Moving on then from the contemplative garden, we move further down the campus towards, which is quite funny to say, the graveyard. There is a graveyard in the college because, you know, as you'd expect with it being a seminary.
People died
And they were buried there, which is, you know, kind of sad, you know, in a sense. You know, they go to study there, they spend their entire life there, and then when they die, they're buried there.
And that's it.
And that is it. The interesting thing about this graveyard, which I love, is that for some reason, in the past, they decided that they would grow yew trees down the entire path of the graveyard, but that they would bend them so that they kind of crisscross over the path.
Oh, like the dark hedges.
Yeah. And they've basically created this like super, just really, really creepy path leading up to the entrance to the graveyard.
Nice.
And then naturally, right at the entrance is this life-size crucifix, just right at the entrance there.
Because that'll put you at ease.
Oh, 100%. And naturally,
a Roman torture device.
Exactly. And naturally, when you're walking there at night, you know, if you're even just walking past the graveyard, not going in, you know, you turn and you look, you just see this fucking just like terrifyingly dark corridor leading down to this giant crucifix at the entrance. It's a bit of a sinister kind of vibe to it. Interesting all the same.
Yeah.
When we get to the graveyard, there's not a huge amount there, obviously, except for graves. You know, there's some unmarked graves. Mm-hmm. There's a crypt there for a priest that was apparently terrified of being buried alive. So they built a crypt there for him, and they buried him in there with a one-sided door that could only be opened from the inside.
Oh.
And he never opened the door himself. So we're to assume that he did actually die.
There's a lot of superstition going around in this place that believes in like heaven and hell.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, there's quite a few graves there. Yeah, as I said, there are some unmarked graves there, and there are some dated, the unmarked graves from 1842 to 1845, and they kind of form the core of the final story, which I'm about to bring you to. And I'd like to point out that these graves are very much so there for anyone that's doubting this. They are unmarked though, which is the key thing. So I've mentioned these unmarked graves from 1842 to 1845 because they are the reason why Maynooth is so famous for ghost stories.
Right.
They are linked to room number 2, which is in Rhetoric House and is known on the campus as the Blood Room.
Ooh.
So the Blood Room, Rhetoric House, or room number 2, whatever you want to call it, it used to be student accommodation. Basically, students would stay there.
Right.
Each of the students would have their own room. It was no bunking back in the day. You know, you got your own room.
God, man, we've really gone downhill.
I know. As you approach Rhetoric House, you can actually see the room I'm talking about. It's there's 3 kind of windows outside it, and the middle one, basically, you can see from the outside, it's boarded up. From the very moment you start in first year, you're told the story of the Blood Room, basically, and that it's boarded up and no one uses the room anymore, and you know, it's locked off from the rest of the university. Mm-hmm. That's not the case. It is actually used basically as like a photocopy room now.
Oh, okay.
But crucially, it's not used as student.
The banality of evil.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not used as a student accommodation anymore because in 1842, A new student came to Maynooth, did his entrance exams. I saw him described as an unremarkable student, not incredibly talented, but by no means a poor student.
Okay, so pretty mid.
Yeah, just as average student trying to be a priest. So he apparently seemed to struggle with his work in the first few weeks, and every day seemed to be struggling just a little bit more, and was apparently like very clearly like neglecting his studies.
Right.
He would even go so far as to not be seen at mass. Which,
ooh, yeah, like that's a biggie out of seminary.
You're training to be a priest.
You gotta get your ass to mass.
Yeah, you're training to be a priest. Yeah, you're fucking around there by not going to mass. And some days he wouldn't even come down for any of his meals. Some people said that he seemed to be a bit depressed, and he apparently claimed to the chaplain that he was being tormented. The chaplain kind of pushed a little bit further, and he apparently was adamant that he was being tormented by the devil. No one really kind of believed this, and they basically just put it down to this is just kind of an angsty student that's maybe getting a bit in over his head, and he's trying to just pretty much just make an excuse to, you know, the church that it's the devil, so they'll kind of give him a pass.
The old devil excuse.
Yeah, probably trying to assume that if he says it's the devil in a seminary, that people will be quite sympathetic to him. They'll be like, oh, you know, don't worry, it's okay, you know, we'll look after you, we'll help.
Yeah.
Just, you know, just student things. So one night he was downstairs and was kind of talking about things and was talking about how he was being tormented, but didn't say much else after that, and he went up and went off to bed. The next morning, the head count was done in Pugin Hall, which is the kind of the cafeteria area, I suppose, still in the college now. He didn't come down for breakfast. So at the time, this was classed as like the junior house. Mm-hmm. So all the youngest seminarians slept on the top floor. The oldest ones slept closer towards the chapel, and the dean of the house basically was furious with this lad. Like, apparently he had been causing issues like this quite consistently, and he just decided he'd had enough. So he went storming upstairs to the guy's room, as he said, ready to beat him black and blue.
Oh, jeez.
I quote, to tear lashes off of him.
Ooh.
And as the dean basically burst into the room, the student was lying there in his nightshirt in a pool of his own blood, with his throat slit ear to ear.
Who would... Okay, no, I guess I have to do the rest of this because I have so many questions.
Okay. So as I saw it described then, quote, it was a tragedy, but not much else was thought of it after that.
Oh, God. You know, it was like, well, that's sad, and then that was it.
Yeah, so I think the logic is that they're trying to say that, you know, if you've enough young people in one place for long enough, like, tragedies do unfortunately occur, especially in kind of university settings and things like that.
Tragedy's one thing, but throat slitting, that's another thing.
Oh, I agree, but I think it's kind of just putting it down to he was depressed and that was it. So they just kind of didn't talk about it.
So do they think he slit his own throat? That's commitment.
Yeah, so they decided it was a suicide. So they decided to close off room 2 for 2 or 3 years, basically, until the boys who'd been in the classes had moved to the other side of campus and weren't going to pass on the story to new residents, which I see the logic there. You know, they're trying to kind of shut this story down before it kind of grows legs. So in 1845, 3 years later, a second new student who was a freshman was put into the room to sleep here. Again, pretty average student, not top of the class or anything, but he wasn't struggling. It's just this regular dude, just a guy being a dude.
Just a guy being a dude. He was Knuff.
He was Knuff. He was comfortable with it. You know, one night he went to bed. The next morning, head count was done again in Pugin Hall, and again, a student was missing from room number 2. The dean stormed across the campus to basically get him out of bed.
Right.
And when he entered room number 2, exactly the same as before, he found the student lying in a pool of blood with his throat slit.
Oh.
So the graveyard that I mentioned earlier, those 2 freshmen were buried in those unmarked graves that I mentioned because they were viewed as suicides, and they didn't get buried with their full rights because obviously suicide at the time was a sin.
You've got to be joking me. Like, slitting your own throat? That's like the exact same way. That's I've watched too much Criminal Minds. I'm like, I'm already profiling the killer.
So finally then, 18 years after the first incident in 1860, a third young trainee priest was housed in that room. Mm-hmm. Apparently the college themselves had forgotten why no one used the room.
They had forgotten.
Yeah, they claimed they'd forgotten anyway. They just knew that something had happened there and the room was just not used.
Right.
But obviously they had enough students that they kind of went like, we need to put someone in there because we won't have space otherwise. Towards the beginning of his time studying in Maynooth, apparently he had what they described as a most awful night. According to his account, he was shaving and he all of a sudden felt this overwhelming urge to use the razor to slit his throat.
Ooh.
And when he looked into the mirror, he could see Satan standing behind him.
Hey, our boy.
So he claims that the devil himself was standing directly behind him, urging him to take his own life.
This is the devil definitely being more serious than in, like, he's not playing cards this time. He's out for blood.
For sure, he's not the playful devil gambling.
No.
He's turned up to a seminary and is getting priests to kill themselves.
Yeah, that's a different day of the week.
Yeah. So the only thing that this student decided that he could do, the only thing that he could think he could do, was to jump out the window into the yard rather than obviously slitting his throat. He broke both of his legs and his arm, but managed to actually survive. And the priest basically came around, the Monsignor came, and the boy told him his story. So the priest basically decided at the time then, the senior priest basically surmised that this must have been what happened to the two previous students.
Yeah.
They basically like succumbed to Satan's influence and slit their throat.
So it was, yeah, this is pissing me off. It's a bit victim shaming. Like, you're still blaming them for like succumbing to the devil.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, they basically said that the students either weren't strong enough or panicked or didn't think that they could jump out the window basically and kill themselves. So this basically, I think from what I gather, it wasn't talked about, and it was decided though from that point onwards that no student should ever be put into that room again.
Right.
Now the reason why it's called the blood room is there is still a stain on the floor and people have decided that is the blood stains from the two students that had killed themselves.
Oh, creepy. I love it.
The bloodstains supposedly stand exactly where the washing basin was when it was still used as a room.
Oh, that's so now people just stand on the bloodstain making copies.
Yeah.
That is office culture 2023.
It is. So in 1860, so this is the same year of that third student, a paper was actually signed allowing the removal of the front wall of the room. Mm-hmm. A section of arch was put into the room and a statue of St. Joseph was placed where the window used to be, basically transforming it into a small chapel.
Okay.
And they basically, Maynooth decided collectively that it wouldn't ever be used as a bedroom again.
Fair enough. Because, I mean, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you. But fool me 3 times and we won't use it as a bedroom anymore.
Exactly. So the statue of St. Joseph actually is still there to this day. You can you can see the room. Like you can go up there and see it yourself.
Cool. I mean, like, not cool that they died, but I mean, it's interesting that you can still go see the room and everything.
Yeah. And above the altar, that's still there, they inscribed the phrase, obviously in Latin, "O Lord, preserve us from sudden and unprepared death."
Oh, okay. Very specific.
Yeah, exactly. So just as one final addition to this story, and the one I suppose that everyone knows as part of it. So shortly after all these events, but before the room was converted, a young bishop decided that he needed to stay in the room to basically investigate what had happened.
He was a Spooky AF fan before we were going.
Oh, he was. Like, he was ready. He probably came with his, like, all his ghost hunting equipment, his Bible, his crucifix.
His holy water. He was ready to go.
So he'd heard the stories and decided that something should be done about it. At the very least, a senior staff member basically should stay there and investigate. So him being a bishop decided that he was probably the best qualified for the job. Mm-hmm. He came out the next morning. Apparently, his hair had turned white.
Ah, great.
He supposedly never spoke of his experience again, but apparently did mention to one colleague that when he stayed in the room, that Satan appeared to him, and basically he did battle with Satan for the entire night, effectively trying to, like, ward him off, and in doing this, his hair turned completely white.
This kind of brings up the haunted house paradox of, like, why don't you just leave the house?
Yeah, I know. I suppose he maybe felt like he couldn't leave.
Yeah.
I guess, but not long after this specific night that the bishop stayed there, that's when the decision was made that it would be taken out of rotation as a bedroom and turned into a chapel.
Okay.
So that's kind of where it leaves us then. So as I said, it's no longer a bedroom. You can still go there, and there is supposedly the blood stain there, which is apparently exactly where wash hand basin used to be. So it does kind of give it a little bit. And as I said, there is that paper as well that was signed saying that the room would be never again to be used as a bedroom.
Yeah. And now the copy machine just makes really weird copies.
It's like everything is, like, written backwards.
Yeah, written backwards and upside down.
Yeah, in some sort of, like, ancient version of Latin.
Yes, in like a Latin-esque script.
Yeah, but that draws to a conclusion the stories of Maynooth that I have chosen. There are more more stories. Stories, as I said, of cursed footpaths, and in ancient times when the castle was there, of like mass hangings and stuff that took place. So there's still a lot to Maynooth, but I've just chosen I suppose the highlights.
Yeah, no, they're really interesting, and like they all have a lot of it can be contributed to like life in a seminary must not have been very interesting in the 19th century. So like there could be some boredom, like
yeah, for sure. You know, like I'd say this definitely has something to do with it.
yeah,
I think the nun seeing death himself is an interesting one.
it is.
Particularly considering where it is, like it's seminary, you know.
Yeah, and like I mean, yeah, it's all like the fact that it was a seminary and like and part convent kind of place just makes it a really rife ground for these kind of stories and gives it an extra flavor for sure.
Well, yeah, totally. You know, and then on top of that as well, we also have, you know, our little spooky boy just playing pranks on people in his room, you know, piano and stuff like that.
And then we've got some activities from our other spooky boy, the devil, that we do not agree with. Playing cards and shooting through the roof is one thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like rocket devil's fun. Like slit your throat devil's not so fun.
Yeah. This is definitely a different version of the devil that we've not seen yet. I'm assuming it's because it's a seminary that he's kind of like, this is the biggest middle finger that he can give to God possible.
Yeah.
Getting young priests to kill themselves definitely kind of sends a message.
For sure.
As well with that, you know, those unmarked graves are there. Students did die. Mm-hmm. So it does kind of lend some credence to the whole kind of story around it.
Yeah.
So that kind of, that concludes Maynooth and all things college. You know, I would strongly encourage people to look into this if they can. I think there's still maybe walking tours that goes on around kind of October, November, you know, the kind of the premium time of the year for it.
Yeah, would make sense.
But it is a cool spot, which is very, very interesting, and obviously it's steeped in some pretty sinister, heinous history. So
yeah.
But yeah, as I said, that concludes it for today. You know, I hope everyone enjoyed it. Suze, do you have any final thoughts on the matter?
I mean, it's interesting. I just think that like anywhere where there's like hyper religious people, there's going to be some interesting goings on and the supernatural kind of realm of things because they're so like embedded in the afterlife and what's involved in getting there and all of that I think that like there are going to be echoes of weird shit like kind of spiraling out around it. And so I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think if you're kind of steeped in that all the time, it's only natural that sort of stuff would start to manifest itself.
I mean, and I'm a little sad that like the devil is then like a nefarious character in this one and not a fun jaunty one.
It did kind of bring me some sadness to have to report on this version of the devil.
But I'm sure we'll find some other fun ones.
Yeah, I'm sure there's more fun stories of the devil out there than ones of him getting priests to kill themselves.
Yeah, that's a big rim.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope everyone has had a fun time listening to this one, and you know, I hope you all have a lovely weekend ahead of you. And if you have any of your own stories from Maynooth University, please do share them with us. I would be more than happy to do a follow-up episode with some personal stories from people who've had their own experiences there.
Absolutely.
That's it from us today, guys. I hope you all, as I said, have a great weekend, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.